tribal tattoos tell stories, and the one on my left arm is in recognition of my mother and her side of the family, and that's what I like about tribal. You're able to tell a story on it, and but at the same time, I can look pretty badass with my employees as well. So.
Welcome to another edition of the Courageous Podcast. I'm really excited about this one because my guests, sometimes your guests, sometimes you don't. You're like, it's kind of the Kevin Bacon game. You met someone through someone, and you want to interview them. And this is not the case. Phil Horvath and I, we go back probably, what are we, 7 years now? 10 years?
Yeah, probably about 7, I think. I think 7's right.
And look, for those listening, because we're not showing video here, you got two good-looking guys here, but follically challenged gentlemen. Let's just call a spade here, Phil, right? It can't be the first time you've heard this, because you are the president of Floyd's 99 Barbershop, and we met through Dennis Ratner, right, when you were back running Hair Cuttery and all the brands underneath that brand. So first of all, how does one get into this space, by the way?
Yeah. Well, for me, thanks a lot, Ryan. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was really family. I got into it through born into the industry. I just had a father that was a hairdresser, and and also a grandfather was a hairdresser, and so I just was born into that and grew up in a family business of hairdressers. And even though I'm, to your point, follically challenged and bald these days, I still stuck with it. And but it's one of the best industries on this earth in terms of what you can do for others, but also not only our clients, but in terms of also the people that work for us as well, too. It's just a very uplifting business and uplifting industry to be in. So I've stuck with it for 30 plus years now.
I mean, you're a Stanford guy, but you're also a badass. I mean, come on, like I've had like dinner with Phil maybe 3 months ago. He's got this killer tattoo. It's like all down the arm. Talk to me about that tattoo.
Yeah. Well, being in the salon industry, in the business, I felt at some point in time I had to reflect, because probably 90% of our employees are all tatted out, right? So I figured I needed to jump in the pool and be part of what they do. But in all seriousness, actually, we all go through life changes, and I was at a point in my life going back, because it's probably 20 years, and really reflecting on where I was headed and personally and business and such, and decided to take a trip and do some reflection on that. And on that trip, happened to be in Hawaii at the time, I landed with a friend of mine, and he had a tattoo artist that did all tribal stuff. And so I said, well, as part of this journey for me, kind of my next phase in life, I wanted to kind of signify that in ink on me, right? So that's what led to the tribal tattoo that's all up and down my arm. And since then, I've got another one on my right shoulder, which is a work in progress, and I'll continue that, because, like they say, when you get one, you always want another, and it is true. You want to keep that journey going with your tattoos. But the great thing about mine is tribal tattoos tell stories, and the one on my left arm is in recognition of my mother and her side of the family, and that's what I like about tribal. You're able to tell a story on it, and but at the same time, I can look pretty badass with my employees as well. So.
It's funny. You think the courageous guy would have a tattoo? I don't have a tattoo yet. I think I want to get my cat logo. I love the line art. I think that's the one I want to get. I'm not sold yet on when I want it or where I want it. I just know if I was going to get one, but I like your insight. Like, once you get one, it's almost like the gateway tattoo into the rest of the body. So that's my future.
I could see you with one, Ryan, though. You definitely carry it. You could pull it off for sure.
All right. It's good to hear. So talk to me about how you go from let's talk about your journey. You already kind of mentioned like the journey, and tattoos are a journey in some crazy way, but like the family business was your father was there first. And so when you go to Stanford, like, do you know you want to go into this business from Stanford?
Yeah, no, it's so I had the family business and the heritage there, being an entrepreneurial family, and so at the same time, from an education standpoint, I was the first kid in our family to really go to what I'll call a legitimate four-year college. Right, I had my siblings. My sister went to actually cosmetology school, become a hairdresser. My brother did a short stint at community college, and then went into professional sports. So for me, it was, and my parents immigrated from Europe, so having college education was important to them, and getting their kids really off on the right start. So I was the youngest of three, so I really was instilled in me to be successful and to drive myself to really make them proud of what they had done by coming to the United States, building a great business themselves, building a life for their family. That kind of immigrant story, right? Being first generation. So happened to get into Stanford, which was a great experience from a standpoint of I was a college athlete, but also a college scholar. And Stanford's the kind of school that definitely honors both. They respect the fact that you're a great athlete, but you're also great in academics and you're really driven. And so I really went with the intention of getting into law. Really, I wanted to get into environmental law was my original plan because I grew up in the state of Colorado, native of Colorado, which if anybody's been to Colorado, it's definitely a very lovely state, law by nature. I'm a big skier. And so for me, getting into environmental law was my goal, to really help protect the environment. And that's kind of where my original thought process was. But after college and taking a break, not going right to law school, just really fell in love with business and running a business, and ultimately got back in the family business after about a year out of college, and that's where kind of the passion and love of this industry kind of hooked me, and stayed with me to this day.
And so the first, you could sort of see Stanford, and then there's the 12 years of, I don't know where Phil went before Ulta. Correct. So give me a little bit take me back to young Phil, right? You have this idea that you want to go into business. Like you said, maybe it shifted a little bit from what you thought you were going to do, but where did you start?
Yeah. So where I started initially was out of college. I, decided to definitely, get a job, and start working. So I actually went into securities and insurance sales. So I kind of got a sales job with a brokerage firm here in Colorado, and started that, and which was a great experience, first step for me, because it forced me to get out into many different businesses that I was interfacing with, to work with them on their benefits programs and so forth and so on. And I'll never forget, one of the biggest accounts I had was the state of Colorado, actually. And my job was to service some of the big state entities. And one which was a great experience was actually the prison system. So I actually spent a good 6 months in and out of the prisons down in southern Colorado, from maximum security to minimum security, and working with those employees to sign them up on life insurance. And one thing I would say is it was probably the easiest sell job I ever had, because if you're working in a prison as a guard and you need to help protect yourself, you'll buy a lot of life insurance. So it was a great experience, but it just taught me a lot about what other people do for business. I met with bankers, I met with government entities, just a lot of different businesses, and it really, one thing it showed me is that there's a multitude of diversity of business, but 50, 60, 70% of the people I interface with weren't happy at their jobs, to be quite honest with you. They just were in jobs that they weren't content with and weren't passionate about, weren't living, what they wanted to do. And so that in itself taught me a big lesson of, hey, what I'm going to do for my life and career, I better love it, have fun at it, and enjoy it. Because if I don't, I'm going to be miserable. And that's not how I would want to choose to live my life.
Phil, I don't think much has changed from that problem. They're calling this the Great Resignation, and it's sort of sad, frankly, that it's taken a short circuit of a pandemic to remind people that they're human, and if they don't like what they're doing, they should go find something else. And I know sometimes you kind of comment on my little newsletter, and I like to throw these business haikus out every once in a while. And one of them, the ones that I had written recently, I'd love your take on, is related to this exact topic. And it's pandemic problem, inspiration, where are you? Don't have it, they leave. And so pandemic problem, inspiration, where are you? Don't have it, they leave. Do you find this to be even more true as the leader of Floyd's today?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that there's no doubt that, to your point, you're right on. Everybody's kind of taking stock and who they're at, where they're at in life, and what do they want to be their life to be. Having 18 plus months to think about it. So we find that in our organization right now, that giving people purpose and being a purpose-driven organization where people feel part of a community and part of something bigger than themselves is more important than ever. I always believe that, anyways, and always live that way through my businesses, but I think that's even more important now, and COVID's shown that. And so, for us, we've got to look at how do we double down on that purpose and really make that part of who we are and how we behave and how we live. And I have no doubt by doing that, that'll make our organization more successful. And those individuals then will, think about staying with us and retaining their employment because they don't then have that reason to leave, because they do feel that somebody's, developing them. They're a part of something bigger than themselves, et cetera.
How big is the staff?
We are in our organization. So we've got from a home office about 35 individuals that work here in our home office, but then we've got 1,000 plus employees out in the field as well in our shops, barbers, stylists that also work. And then we also have a part of our organization's franchise. So we have franchise partners as well too. So part of our journey now is really creating this purpose-driven organization that appeals to all those various constituents, from employee base in our home office to our field employees to our franchise partners, because they then have their own employees, right? So it's really creating a holistic community that's, we actually put it under the umbrella of the Floyd's Nation. We've actually kind of started to really define what the Floyd's Nation's about, because if you look at it, a nation has many things from a cultural perspective that's unique to them, and that we're really very intentional about that place. And then we've already had that. The company's been around 20 years. It's already had some of that, but now it's kind of starting to step back and take a new look at it and really help kind of what I would call more of an evolution. It's not a revolution, but how do we evolve it to really be pertinent to today and to the future? Because as the younger generations of employee base comes up, I guarantee you they are going to continue to be more purpose-driven in their focus for where they want to spend their time at work.
So, Phil, this is a show about courage. So I got to ask a tough question. And again, maybe you won't see it as tough because who you are, but you spend 18 years or so at Ulta, and then you go and you do 4 at Hair Cuttery. And I'm sure that there's things that you wish were different. Or let's rephrase this as, can you share like something that was like a black eye for you in the past that you've learned from and brought forward with you? Because you're now 6 months in as president of Floyd's. So like, give me like one thing from your past that you're like, man, that eats at me. And here's what I've learned from it.
Yeah. I would say that for sure. Listen, for me, the last 18 months, right? I think for all of us have been challenging, right? In some way, shape, or form. And as you indicated, with going through a worldwide pandemic. But at the same time, in the line of business I'm in the service business, where you're serving people and you're dependent upon, those clients and those people, and then your employee base, thousands of employees, right, to be able to interact and come together, when that's short-circuited and put on hold for 3 months, and then you're having to restart the engine again, is a very challenging environment to be in. And the last organization I was at, as you alluded to, great organization, the Hair Cuttery Group out on the East Coast, and privately held business, fantastic business, and it was hit extremely hard by COVID, and because of that, it caused us to really have to look at the business, make some hard decisions about in terms of the initial furloughs we had to do. And listen, if somebody asked me, you'll have a day when you have to, on March 21st, 2020, that I'll never forget this day, get on a meeting with, across the country with 10,000 people and inform them that they're being furloughed. Trust me, that to even get to that point of having to face that conversation and share that news and information was extremely, extremely painful for me. And then subsequently, the business went through a bankruptcy process, which, I helped lead it through bankruptcy and out of bankruptcy. And that whole, journey was very humbling, number one. And number two, a lot of soul searching for finding courage to every day get up and keep positive about, hey, my ultimate goal here is, as hard as things are for me, there's so many other people out there that in our field organization at that time with the company I was at that have it a lot harder off. And how do I make sure we can get this thing to the other side of bankruptcy and the other side of COVID, because there's thousands of jobs on the line. And that to me was very humbling, very much one of painful process to go through. But at the same time, I'll look back on it, and I look back on it today and say, that to me just taught me a lot about how leadership through even the darkest times, if you get up every day and you think positive and you have positive intent, you will end up on the other side in a better place. Might not feel like it at the moment. The moment you might feel like this is just miserable. And there's certain days it was. But part of it is getting positive, reaching out, talking to people. I mean, I think that's as human beings. The one thing I'll share that I learned is you got to just start talking to people, because you'll find that, hey, everybody has problems. We all have problems. It's all relative. But everybody's gone through some challenges, and having conversations with others. And I'll give a quick example of that. There's another gentleman I've followed in terms of some of his writings and books and things like that. You do a great job of it as well, Ryan, on courage. His definitely about positive leadership. And I followed him, and I just sent him an email and said, hey, man, can you chat for half hour? Let's just chat. You don't know me, right? And he said, hey, no problem. Let's get on for an hour. And, we spent an hour on the phone talking about his journey, the tough things he went through, and how he, got to the other side. And so it just, and my point is, you just got to connect with the other human beings, because when you do that in that process, it'll help you through your issue and your challenges and get you to the other side where things will always be better.
Well, I love that. Like I always commend, like time is a finite thing, but like when you reach out to someone and you're proactive, like if you don't reach out to someone, you already know what the answer is going to be. Right. Like, but when you're proactive about that, and this word keeps coming up for me too. I'm curious to get your take, which is the word's actually curious. Like I was very close to, was the book Return on Courage, or was it Return on Curiosity? Because like the more curious you are to listen to other people and to hear their stories, there's opportunities, there's teaching opportunities, learning opportunities. Do you find yourself as a curious guy?
Yeah, most definitely. Oh, yeah, big time. I think I would attribute that to my father. I'll be honest with you. He was the ultimate entrepreneur, and what drove him was that curious streak that he had. He was always looking for something, and I'm always tell the story. We'd always go on family vacations, and nothing fancy. We'd drive everywhere. You're at that age where you drive across the country, right? But everywhere we would go, because he was in the beauty business, salon business, we would be going out into other salons on vacation and eating people that he connected with ahead of time, right? And had dinner with them. And, and it was that curious mind of wanting to grow, wanting to know more, wanting to understand how can we be better. And, for him, it was business focused, right? It was so business focused, but it applies to all aspects of our life, business, personal, whatever, right? And I just think that curiosity stayed with me ever since. Or, connecting with others just makes you a better person. Obviously makes you smarter, but more importantly, it makes you better in your ability to deal in business, but then deal in personal life as well too.
So you're 6 months in. I think you're 6 months in now at Floyd's.
Yeah, it's month 7. So yeah, just over 6. Yeah.
All right. What have you learned so far?
What I've learned so far is that really great brands are sometimes created in a situation where the people that create those brands didn't really know what they were doing in the first place. and Floyd's is a great class example of that. It's a brand that is a great brand from a standpoint of our customer loyalty. The service scores our clients give us are great. The loyalty of our team and what the business has created. And it was really created by 3 brothers that came from outside the and they were all 3 of them teenagers that grew up in Maryland and got into stadium concessions. That was the business they got into. They were selling cotton candy as teenagers, and then they created a business out of that, and they stuck with that business. They're still in that business today. They obviously have a large organization now, but they in that journey for them, they wanted to diversify their business too. And part of that was because they had a lot of contracts at Major League Baseball parks around the country. And the strike hit back in the day when Major League Baseball lockout happened, and they knew that they needed to diversify. And two of the brothers, one of them was going to value salons, some of the ones that charge a cheap price, and never know what you're going to get. And then one of the other brothers was paying $50 for his haircut and paying too much, and he wanted to spend, and was more of a full service salon. He didn't love the environment. So the two of them got together and said, hey, why don't we create something where we would love to hang out and get our haircut? And there's a white space there. There's this kind of place in the middle. There's old-fashioned barbershops and there's full-service salons, but there's nothing that's kind of new hybrid that combines salon with a barbershop and modernizes the whole approach. And I credited them to this day. They hit a home run with that in their thought process and how they created this. And what I'll say, and the lesson I learned too, is that sometimes when you're not from that space or that industry, allows you to do that because you don't know any better. And they didn't know any better. And so they were just kind of winging it, but they kind of knew from a consumer mindset, they understood the consumer, solution, what they're trying to solve for. And then the vehicle of the shop they created was uniquely different because they didn't have any preconceived notions of what a cool looking barbershop should be or shouldn't be. And I give them 100% credit. So what I've learned is, the business and the brand they built is special. And now it's about my role in working with the family and the leadership team here to craft the future for the brand. So it not only is relevant still today, but relevant tomorrow as well.
And again, at 7 months in, I'm sure, I think we had dinner probably 3 months ago. So I know you're attempting to do your listening lap and do as your father taught you in an odd way, right? Like you're going from city to city and like meeting everybody that you can. But I'm sure, especially trying to navigate a pandemic still, it's been awfully hard to get in front of, all 1,000 employees. So let's say for a moment that all 1,000 were listening here and you had a chance to sort of tell them about you and what you hope you bring to the table, and they can really get a chance to know you. What would you tell them?
What I would tell them is that, what's most important is that we never lose sight of the fact that human interaction day in and day out in our shops between a stylist and barber and their client is ultimately the most important thing that we have to value, and we have to make sure we recognize that and encourage that type of interaction, and that it's a great experience for both parties, for both the people that work for us, but also that client coming in the door. And that's why, we're all about the vibe in our shops. We call it the Floyd vibe. It's the rock and roll music. We actually have a decibel level. You have to play music at that level or higher, right? Because we know that creates energy and creates vibe, right? The common language is music for all of us, right? In some way, shape, or form. And but then that ability to connect with the clients, give a great service, make sure they walk out feeling great. Even a guy like me who doesn't have a lot of hair left, I get my hair cut, I feel better when I leave. So, that's a human nature kind of element that we have to. And so, my point is that I bring it always back to them. It's always about them and about what's happening. And I really preach to my team today is, we're going to grow the business. We've got to scale it. We've got to grow it. We've got to create our imperatives, our strategies, all those things that, when you're in a business that's scaling, like I was at Ulta for 17 years, that's just part of waking up every day. That's what I do, right? But more importantly, it's getting our team to understand that as we grow bigger, we've got to still think small, because in each shop, that's a community unto itself that has its own interactions, its own vibe. And we've got to make sure they're allowed to continue to bring that out, no matter if we're at 125 shops or we're at 400 shops. And that's probably one of the more challenging things to do as you scale a business, because when you scale, there's a lot of, as you bring people on into your home office, there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of, wanting to create programs and processes, right? That's just, you hire people and they got salaries and they got to justify their salaries, right? So my job as a leader is to get everybody to constantly understand the bigger picture, the purpose. Now, what we're doing is creating that purpose out in every shop for our staff, if that makes sense.
I have to imagine that this is like a very thin line of the person you're connecting with, because they're stylists, right? There's a certain level of creativity right? And coolness and emotion. And yet they also are business people. Like they're trying to be good business people. They're sort of toggling between both sides of the brain. Maybe they don't like rules that much. Like, what's it like? What's the interactions like in the space?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. No, you're exactly right. It is the yin and the yang, and it's being able to create an environment that maximizes the creative element that they bring, and but then gets them to understand that, to be successful at what they're doing, they have to be consistent in their behaviors, right? And those behaviors are how they treat clients, how they handle clients, how they talk to them, recommend products, all those things. And we call in the business, there's a lot of creative hairdressers that are really awesome at what they do in creating great hair, but we call them starving artists because they're great artists, but in the end, they're not making money and not successful. And so, big part of what we really focus on is that business side and more of the, hey, it's great that you're great and creative, but how do we help you really accomplish your goals and your dreams? And that's the big approach for us. Is we first got to start with getting them to open up about where they want to go, and by doing that, then we're able to now start talking about, okay, if that's where you want to go in your career and the kind of money you need to make, let's help create a plan for how you're going to do that and the behaviors that'll take. And as a coach, as a shop leader, my job is to bring the best out in you and still let you do kick-ass hair and be creative and who you are. But at the same time, we want to make sure you're successful at it, because if you are, you're going to stay. You're going to be happy and you're going to feel fulfilled in your purpose in life. And, that can be that single mom that, works for us, that she's just trying to get food on the table for her kids and be successful in her career. And, or that single guy that, has just gotten into the industry and wants to be great at being a great barber. Right. So the best thing we can do is teach our leaders how to coach to that and how to be really effective at leading them to.
Again, you're a half year in. I keep coming back to that because I know you're trying to do this like listening lap. So how many cities have you already hit? And can you share maybe a story from the road that's inspired you of you're like, oh man, how cool is this? Like, is there one story that bubbles to the surface for you?
Yeah, there's many, because that's what I love about my job. I mean, I've always been a field-based person to some degree, right? I'm in the home office, but always been operations, right? An operations guy. So operations, you're on the field. But now as leading an organization, for me, my first objective was, to your point, getting the listening lab, was getting out there in front of as many stylists, shop leaders, our franchise partners, so I think I've hit probably 12 cities now and been on the tour and visited. Out of our 125 shops, I've been to 95 of them, right? So I've been to all of our corporate shops and been to a good chunk of our franchise shops as well too. And for me, it is about going out and talking to people and listening and really getting to know them and them getting to know me and talking about our purpose organization. And the beauty of it was I did see consistently everywhere I went, I'd ask, what do they love about Floyd's? And it was a consistent answer, no matter what location I went to. And a big part of it was around Floyd's is, again, I credit the brothers. They created a concept that we really value individuality. I mean, they were about diversity before diversity was a thing, right? So that they really said, hey, you come as you are. And so we don't really have a strict dress code, for example. I mean, so our stylists, barbers can be creative with who they are. And, and so meeting, the team, a couple of stories, and we're down with a franchise partner in Austin and met one of their top individuals. She immigrated from Asia and she's a great stylist. And she was just so passionate about the company and the brand and being a part of that. And she was just couldn't say enough good things about the franchise partner that owns her shop and how they're bought into Floyd's and the Floyd's Nation. But it stuck with me because she was an immigrant, very successful, committed to her family and committing to providing for her family back home in Asia. And that to me just said, hey, that we're living out our purpose with her. I already knew it, right? And there were so many stories like her when I traveled, that those individual stories of those people. And, so that's one. And the other one I would share is that there's two quick ones here. One was a gentleman that, just went through a whole journey himself in terms of his transition, as a really transgender transition that he's going through right in life. And he loved the fact that Floyd's is for everyone and that we value everyone. And so whatever journey you're at in your life, you're welcome here. And he really appreciated the fact that we acknowledge that as well. And then last but not least, the best one was I went to our shop, the first shop that ever opened here in Denver. And I said, I want to get my haircut by the longest term employee. And so she's been there 19 years. And Lupe's her name, matter of fact, she's a great barber. And matter of fact, she was great. I sat in her chair and said, let's talk, about shop and let's talk what's going on. And she graduated from the high school I went to here in Colorado. And so it was special. But she's been with the brand 19 years and, really has raised, as a single mom, raised 2 daughters, and now they're in college. And, just that, again, stuck with me as Floyd's is serving its purpose. But how do we continue to bring that to life?
I love that, man. I think my favorite part actually might be that there isn't a strict dress code, but there's a strict music code. That's pretty cool. Right? Like, no, you can wear what you want, but the music has to be at this level or higher if you're gonna play with this. So we're coming down the home stretch here, but you talk about this nation of Floyd's where individuality reigns, and I think that's such a cool thought. And you talked about even just what happens when you sit in the chair, and it sort of transports you into a safe space. It sure feels like the future of Floyd's or the space. Is like there's like a mental health component here, right? I mean, is it not just because you're hitting what's on the top of my head, but because we're having a real conversation, you're getting on inside my head, and I feel like I'm in a safe place for that. Is that where this is all going, do you think?
Yeah, listen, I think so. Salons have always, and barbershops, been that community hub, right? Where people come, they come for a purpose, obviously get their haircut, but more importantly, they come to connect with other human beings, right? And the beauty of our business is that Amazon, at least in the near term, I don't see them putting us out of business, right? So they're not going to cut your hair, right? So or color your hair, whatever the case may be. So but I do see, to your point, and the pandemic even brought that to heighten, clients were coming back out. They saw the value of that service, not only from what it does to them from a physical appearance, but from that inside and how it makes them feel when they leave the shop and they feel, that they kind of are starting anew again, right? That after every visit, I kind of have a chance to start anew again. And whether that's because I'm going out on an interview for a job or I'm going out on my first date with somebody or, whatever the case may be. And so that mental health, I think what we have seen is through the pandemic, obviously it's exacerbated that more than ever for people out there. And I do see our shops ultimately providing a resource. So yes, we're a resource for how they want to look good, but we should be a resource for helping them in some other aspect of their life. And I think that mental health side, especially, majority of our clients, 90% of them are men. And there's no doubt that men's mental health is something that typically is swept under the rug and buried, and more and more it's coming out, which is great. And so I think we can serve a purpose in helping bring that to life and provide some resources for our clients that may be going through something that gets pointed to them in the right direction to find some help, perhaps, because stylists, clients in that chair, they will share things that they don't share with even their priest or their doctor, right? I mean, the stylist tends to be a neutral zone, to your point, where it's kind of free to share because it's a judgment-free zone. And I think we can play a real role in helping people in their lives for sure.
Is that language somewhere in your sort of standards? Because I imagine we have Floyd's and all these different, 125 of them, is that what you said?
Yeah, 125, yeah.
So how hard is it to standardize that? And like you said, they don't like rules, but there's a few rules that we have to play by. How hard is it to do that?
Yeah, I think it's more the spirit of who we are, and it's empowering people, right? I think that's what we got to continue to get better at is, how do we empower everybody that here's the Floyd's Nation, and here's who we stand for, here's what we're about, and we're for everyone, and that everyone is about being welcomed, valued, encouraged, respected, empowered, supported, and equal. I mean, that's kind of how we approach this. And so for us, it's more about giving the framework for our team of what we want that to look like. We call it the Floyd's vibe, but let them really be empowered. And then specifically, it's obviously we can do some campaigns around it. So if we're going to do a mental health campaign around that, and I'm very big on partnerships, so I know there's partnerships we can form out there with other organizations that can help us and we can help them, right? So that's another thing as part of our strategic planning is we got to get better at, as an organization, partnering because in today's world, other groups have done some things that we can learn from and vice versa, and it's not a competitive situation. It's more of how do we just make the greater whole better, if that makes sense.
I have 3 final quick questions. One is a toughie. All right. So, look, I think it's a pretty tough time to build true brand loyalty unless like you find a stylist you love, right? Then it's like you're going where that stylist goes. And so I'm curious, does that make it easier to build brand loyalty for you guys or harder because if the stylist leaves, you go with the stylist? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, no doubt. Being in the industry as long as I have been, that's the challenge is of our industry. Is it is the business within a business, right? That stylists are building their business or barber, and they can take that business and leave anytime they want and take clients with them, right? And they will do that. I mean, that happens. I give the analogy, it's a little bit different than you have a head chef that leads a restaurant. He may open up his own restaurant, but does he steal the clients? Not necessarily, right? So, but hey, listen, at the same time, for us, it's focusing on providing that great purpose so that people do have the connection to the brand that they want to stay from a stylist perspective. If we do that really well, we'll retain them and we'll keep clients, right? But at the same time, building the brand for the clients, that Floyd's, we call it the amplified experience. We know that we have a unique experience in our shops when you go in as a client that you can't get anywhere else today. And if we're good at delivering that consistently, I have no doubt we'll continue to build great brand recognition and be the number one kind of what I'll call, grooming, men's grooming shop in the United States.
You've mentioned the concept of staying on purpose, right? Staying to our true purpose. Just so it's clear, can you share that with us?
Yeah, listen, the clear purpose for us is creating an environment where individuals that they're part of a community where they're here and we're here to help them live their best lives. It's simple as that. We want you to live your best life, and how can we empower you to help you do that in the environment that we provide at Floyd's? And it also applies to our clients, because if we do a great job in providing them with that amplified experience and a great service, it allows them in some way, small shape or form, to leave our shops feeling better, and that'll help them in some way in their life as well too.
All right, last question. You ready?
Ready.
Here we go. All right, look, it's a show about courage, so I would just love to hear like the most courageous moment you've had in your business life, and then if you don't mind sharing, personal life. And the cop out answer is just one thing, and you can go there. But like, let's just start with like, give me that moment. What's that moment for you?
Yeah, so on the business side, I'd say that courage would be two quick ones. One was after my family business sold and my father retired and was able to do that because we were able to sell the business, which was great for him. I went to work for an extremely large organization that's in our industry. And while I was there, I knew after just, a year and a half that the culture and where it was headed was not for me. And it wasn't going to, and I just had the birth of my first son and newly married not too long ago, and had to have the courage to say, hey, this isn't where I want to be. And, it could be easy to stay here and because I'm collecting a paycheck and raise my family. But I said that's not going to be for me. So I started looking and made the leap to go to a new company at the time, Ulta, where they only had 40 stores. Nobody knew about them. They were an equity-backed group that was, when I got there, they were probably 6 months close to bankruptcy, right? So, but having the courage to make that change and be intentional about it and make the leap, as scary as it was at that point in my life, it was the right thing to do. And it really launched me into where I'm at today, right? In that sense. So, and then the second one on that business side would just be, the courage to deal with the pandemic and keep going every day and grind it out. That takes courage. And so many people went through that. That's not just me, right? I think, especially if you're in a service kind of business, restaurant, salon, whatever, it's been tough. And then personally, I'd say, for me, it's the courage to, while I was going through challenges of the pandemic and the business going through bankruptcy, I'll be quite honest with you, I had some personal challenges financially as well that were created out of that business situation that fell on me, that impacted me financially, personally, and put me in a space that having the courage to work through that and get out of that and make some hard decisions about, my life and where I was at and what's important to me, materialistic things versus feeling good about who I am and where I'm going. That took a lot of courage to work through that. At the same time, I was working through a bankruptcy with a company, right? So it was like all four walls were kind of caving in. And the only way out of that was to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And again, seek help, seek conversations with people to help me work through that, and admit that I needed help because, so many of us, we can't admit that we need help. Right. And if you can admit that, you're going to be better for it. So I'd always encourage people to seek help.
I really appreciate that answer. And, I feel like when I left my last life, life where you and I met, my creative agency, it's always the spaces in between, isn't it? It's like the cartilage moments in life where, I knew in my heart that I was leaving for the right reasons, but it didn't mean I had it all figured out. It was messy and it was scary, but I just didn't see how I could denigrate my values by staying where I was, even if that meant letting down a lot of people and putting even my own family at risk. And, and can I say, my wife doesn't work. She works, she's mom, but she doesn't get paid to do that. And so that really resonates with me, that I truly felt like when you write a book about courage, how do you not live the premise, frankly, and leap? It didn't mean I had it figured out, and it was a daily battle to keep me on my course. So appreciate you sharing that. Look, we've been chatting with Phil Horvath 6 months in now, on month 7 as president of Floyd's 99 Barbershop. That's the full name, but Floyd's is what we know it as. Do me a solid. Keep me posted on the next tattoo. I'm really curious what you end up going with. Any final parting words for those who are listening?
My parting words would just be, right now, as we've all experienced, right, it's stay close to those you love and make sure that you are always thinking positive for the future, because, we are blessed and lucky to be, every day, and an old Irish friend of mine, never forget him. He said, a day above ground is always a good day. So, that's why I look at it. You got to live your life and think in that way. And I've just encouraged everybody to have the courage to live that way as well.
Mindset, just a mindset. That's all it is.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Let's go get dinner soon when we're in the same city at the same time. Sound good?
You got it, Ryan. Take care, man.